In the quiet glow of my study, as I mused over a faded love letter that spoke of undying affection and intertwined destinies, an electric sting surged through my veins, the venom of deceit. Lara's words, once my sanctuary, now sneered at me from the screen, a series of passionate emails not meant for my eyes yet screaming her betrayal louder than any confrontation could. With each click, the illusion of our once enchanted marriage crumbled, leaving a bitter taste of irony. I discovered her infidelity in the midst of reminiscing about our love's genesis. The descent into the abyss of my wife's betrayal was the spark that would ignite a plan so meticulously crafted that revenge would seem like an act of poetic justice. You see, I, Ethan Sanders, cherished our small town's history as much as I once cherished Lara. Our community, a tapestry of stories and scandals, pondered the fates of its landmarks, and as the custodian of its past, I unearthed the parallels between my own crumbling legacy and the endangered historical marbles. Characters like Brad, Lara's inconspicuous colleague, and Rachel, my confidant, colored the canvas of my daily ordeal. In a town where everyone knew your name but not your secrets, I was about to ensure that every whisper, glance, and sigh was a note in the symphony of my calculated retribution. Welcome to the unraveling of a love unmade and a revenge best served before an audience that would never see it coming. The days that followed were encased in a veneer of normalcy, a masquerade I donned out of necessity. By day, I stood before my students, discussing revolutions and regimes, all the while a tumult of disbelief and grief churned within me. I plodded through the motions, my voice a hollow echo against the walls of the classroom that had once resonated with my passion for history. The world around me continued unabated, its rhythm unaltered by the quake that had shattered my personal life. As I walked the familiar streets of Willow Creek, the nods and smiles from locals were a reminder of the facade I had to maintain. In the grocery store, at the post office, I was still Ethan Sanders, the earnest history teacher, not the man who lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, envisioning the fragments of a once whole heart. Work became a refuge, albeit a crumbling one. My grading pens hovered over papers longer than they should, my thoughts drifting to decipher the enigma of Lara's distant gaze, her smile that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Colleagues began to whisper when my back was turned, sensing the shift in my aura, noting the dark circles etched beneath my eyes like badges of insomnia. Every strained conversation with Lara was a knife turn in my gut. Her words skated on the surface of trivial matters, never delving into the ocean of our shared history now polluted with lies. I observed her with a detective's scrutiny, noticing the subtle brush of her hand against her phone whenever a message blinked across the screen, each vibration a potential secret that she guarded with a furtive glance. The growing suspicion was a living entity within me, clawing its way up my throat, desperate for air and truth. I saw it mirrored in the suspicious glances between Lara and Brad, the lingering touches, the laughter a decibel too intimate for mere friendship. A silent alarm blared in my mind but was muted by the fear of what confronting it would mean. One evening, with the night air thickening around me, I turned to Rachel. Her little library, a fortress of books and quiet understanding, enfolded me in its sanctuary. With hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea, she listened as my voice broke the silence of her cozy study, laying bare the seismic shifts of my inner turmoil. Rachel watched me with those wise, knowing eyes, her lips a tight line, not of judgment, but of empathy and concern. "Evidence, Ethan," she whispered, her voice a lifeline amidst the maelstrom. "Without it, you're chasing shadows that might just be figments of your wounded heart." And so, Rachel became the anchor in a sea of doubt while the rest of the world continued, blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing in the confines of my once peaceful existence. The town buzzed with its daily routines, and within it, I floated like a spectre, waiting for the proof that would validate my torment, or dispel it as the ghosts of a love that I feared was fading into obscurity. The excuse of gathering evidence became a sort of solace, a structured endeavor in the expanse of my chaos. I couldn't confront Lara, not until I had something concrete, something palpable. This need led me down a path I never envisioned for myself, a silent observer to my own life's disintegration. Each day, I embodied more of the historian than the partner, studying behavioral patterns rather than the relics of the past. I became adept at tracing Lara's movements, noting the frequency of her late nights and the increasingly flimsy excuses that accompanied them. They were simple brushstrokes that painted a picture I was reluctant to see in its entirety. Brad's presence became more pronounced. His friendship with Lara seemed to blossom in direct proportion to the wilting of our own bond. I told myself that coworkers can be friendly, but the laughter that reached my ears from across a crowded room was laced with something more, a secret shared between two people that didn't include the rest of us. During one of Lara's events, I watched from the periphery, the supposed pillar of support. From my vantage point, I glimpsed the subtle interplays, the way Brad's hand rested just a second too long on the small of Lara's back, the shared glances loaded with an unspoken language. These were not the interactions of mere acquaintances or even friends. They were charged with an intimacy that clawed at my insides. It wasn't just their physical closeness that fueled my suspicions. It was the sudden changes in Lara's routine, the unaccounted hours, and the mysterious calls that plucked her away from our quiet evenings together. Even her wardrobe had transformed. Each outfit seemed chosen with an eye for someone else's approval. Amidst this, the specter of the landmark's demolition loomed large, my campaign to save it feeling more like a metaphor for my crumbling relationship than I cared to admit. It was a battle on two fronts, each requiring strategy, determination, and a heart sturdy enough to withstand potential defeat. The divide between my public and private personas deepened. To the world, I was the campaigner, the educator, the man with a cause. At home, I was the silent watcher, cataloging evidence of a life slipping through my fingers. Despite the mounting evidence, I clung to the fringes of doubt, as if holding on to the hope that Lara's actions were innocent could somehow make it true. The love that had once anchored me now felt like a noose, tightening with each passing day. Then, on a night painted with the promise of spring, I decided to follow Lara after a cryptic phone call had drawn her away from dinner. The streets of Willow Creek, with their slumbering charm, became the backdrop to my silent pursuit. My heart pounded in sync with each step she took, leading me farther from the warmth of our shared home, pulling me closer to a truth that threatened to upend everything. What I witnessed that evening cemented the suspicions into unbearable reality. There, beneath the amber glow of a street lamp, was the intimate embrace between Lara and Brad, an image as clear and sharp as the historic facts I taught my students. No more speculation, no more doubt, it was the irrefutable proof of betrayal. The air left my lungs in a rush, and the world around me seemed to crack, the fissures reaching deep into the bedrock of my life. I stood there, a shadow amidst other shadows, as a piece of my history was rewritten in the hushed whispers and tender kisses shared between the two people who had unraveled me. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. The love letter I had once penned to Lara, now a relic of a different time, lay forgotten in the pocket of my coat as I turned away from the scene that sealed the end of us. It was time to confront not just Lara, but the reflection in the mirror that had allowed hope to blind him to the truth for far too long. I drifted back home that night, every footfall a dull thud against the pavements of Willow Creek, a cadence marking the end of innocence. The images of their embrace replayed behind my eyes, a haunting loop I had no power to disrupt. There, in the once comforting recesses of our shared dwelling, engulfed by shadows and silence, the veneer of the life I thought we built began to crumble. The stillness was complete, a stark contrast to the cacophony of emotions raging within me. The house seemed to hold its breath along with me, as I sat in the darkness, the only illumination being the soft glow of Lara's desk lamp that she had forgotten to switch off before her secretive departure. The light cast eerie shapes upon the walls, each one an echo of a memory, a fragment of a time before deceit crept in and nested in the corners of my existence. I didn't turn on the lights, nor did I seek the solace of sleep. Instead, I sat amidst the relics of my former life, staring blankly at the objects that once symbolized our shared dreams and aspirations, the framed picture from our first vacation together, the antique vase we found at a flea market, a silly splurge that Lara had laughingly insisted upon. Hours passed, the night deepened, and eventually, the front door creaked open. The sound of Lara's footsteps was cautious, perhaps sensing the change that had occurred in my absence. Or maybe, guilty consciences are always attuned to the potential for discovery. I remained silent, a ghost in our home, as Lara called out a soft, "Ethan?" That received no reply. She found me there, in the dark, her features barely discernible. "Ethan, what's wrong? Why are you sitting here in the dark?" Concern edged her voice, but it was too late for such theatrics. The performance had lost its audience. I rose from the chair, the love letter, a symbol of a love long past, pressed between my fingers, its creases imprinted upon my skin. I couldn't bring myself to look at her, for fear that the remnants of my shattered world would spill out before I was ready. "Lara," I began, my voice a stranger to my own ears, "I saw you with Brad." Her breath hitched, a soft gasp in the dark, and then, predictably, denial rushed forth. "Ethan, I don't know what you think you saw, but, please, don't," I interrupted, the weary custodian of truth. "I saw everything I needed to. The embrace, the intimacy. It was unmistakable." There was a pause, laden with the weight of things unsaid, the air punctuated by Lara's quiet, defeated sobs. I wondered then if her tears were for the act of betrayal itself or for its discovery. Did it even matter anymore? "Please, Ethan, can we talk about this?" she begged, her voice cracking under the strain of exposed secrets. "There's nothing left to discuss, Lara," I replied, the finality in my tone more for myself than for her. The historian in me yearned to record this moment, to make sense of it, but some chapters resist closure, content to linger unfinished. I moved past her, unable to occupy the same space as the woman who wore Lara's face but was a stranger to me now. My retreat was not just from her, but from the life that was no more. In the quiet sanctuary of my study, surrounded by the chronicles of the past, I contemplated the future. The pain was a living entity within me, yet alongside it grew something else, a resolve as firm as the timbers that held the historical society's building aloft. History was not just about preserving the past, it was about learning from it, and I was a fast learner. The seeds of retribution began to take root, watered by the bitter tears of betrayal. If history had taught me anything, it was that actions had consequences, and reputations were both made and undone by the narratives we weave. As dawn broke, casting a new light upon the end of an era, I resolved to channel the anguish into action. Lara's infidelity had shattered the facade, but it would not dictate my downfall. Instead, it would provide the cornerstone for something new, a campaign not just to save a landmark, but to reclaim my own story. It was time to plan, time to act. It was time for the historian to make history. As the first signs of morning painted the sky with strokes of gold and blush, the study felt like both a sanctuary and a prison. Books lined the walls, their spines as straight and unyielding as soldiers, guardians of the countless tales within, tales that echoed the one unfolding in my own life. I ran my fingers over the leather-bound covers, drawing a semblance of strength from their steadfast presence. In the days that followed, I became a spectre in my own life, haunting the corridors of the school, my lessons punctuated by moments of distraction. Students whispered, sensing a shift in the air, as the jovial, animated Mr. Ethan they knew receded into the shadows of his own making. They couldn't know that my heart had been gutted, its contents spilling out like the entrails of history itself. Even amongst my colleagues, I was an enigma, withdrawn where I once was part of the camaraderie. Rachel, perceptive as ever, noticed the change immediately. Over steaming cups of coffee in her book-crammed office, the conversation turned from literary discourse to personal concern. "Ethan," Rachel began, her eyes searching mine for the truth I wasn't ready to share, "you're not yourself lately. Is everything okay at home?" Her inquiry, gentle and well-meaning, felt like an incision into already raw flesh. The desire to confess, to share the burden of what I had witnessed, fought a war against the need to remain composed, to plan. "It's complicated, Rachel," I finally admitted, my gaze retreating to the comfort of an open history book on the table. Rachel reached out, a touch meant to ground me. "I'm here when you're ready to talk about it." I nodded, grateful for her support, yet unready to visit the depths of my torment with another soul. How could I articulate the battle within? A tempest of emotions thundered through me, fighting for foothold: hurt, betrayal, anger, and beneath it all, a desire for retribution that was growing with each passing hour. I knew I couldn't let the wound fester in the dark, unseen. It craved light, exposure, and oddly, a touch of the dramatic flair that Lara so loved. I took solace in my study, surrounded by the silent witnesses to history's darkest and most triumphant hours, and it was there that my plan began to crystallize. I pored over old texts and journals, my eyes hungry for wisdom. I delved into scandals that once rocked societies much like my own, drawing parallels between those tales and my own misfortune. There was an art to my approach, a careful unfolding of the past that would serve as a mirror to Lara's misdeeds. I reached out to local actors, friends from community theater whom I knew possessed the subtlety and grace required for what I envisioned. Scripts took shape under my pen, narratives woven with enough ambiguity to prevent outright scandal, but which would be unmistakable to those who knew the players in our real-life drama. The coming festival, a celebration of our town's heritage, was the perfect stage. I imagined Lara amidst the crowd, her presence a fixture as the town's premier event planner, her laughter and smiles a mask that I was about to tear away. I met with the Historical Society's board, my voice steady as I pitched the concept of a walking tour that would culminate in a performance like no other, a testament to the consequences of betrayal through the ages. They embraced the idea, unaware of the dual purpose behind my fervor. Day by day, the plan took shape, each piece locking into place with a satisfaction that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was constructing the most important lesson of my career, one that wasn't confined to the four walls of a classroom. This one was deeply personal, unyielding in its intention, and it promised a resolution that would leave the town, and Lara, whispering about it for years to come. As the festival drew nearer, my anticipation grew. I was no longer the man who had sat in the dark, mourning a lost love. I had become the architect of my own resurgence, a historian ready to ensure that this chapter of betrayal would not be forgotten, and that its lesson would be taught in the most unforgettable of ways. The festival was merely a week away when I felt the first twinge of doubt creep into my meticulous planning. I sat at my desk, the glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room, the weight of impending action a heavy cloak upon my shoulders. The actors had their scripts, the Historical Society had publicized the tour, and the town buzzed with anticipation for an event unlike any other. Yet, as I scrutinized each detail, I wondered if the fabric of my strategy would hold against the storm I was about to unleash. I shook off the disquiet, reminding myself that history was not merely about preserving stories of old but also about ensuring that lessons from the past resonate into the present. Wasn't that what I taught my students? The significance of actions and consequences, the indelible ink of accountability that writes itself onto the pages of time. The weekend before the festival, I visited the landmarks that would serve as the stages for our town's most scandalous tales. The weathered stones of the old town hall, the creaking floorboards of the community center, and the stoic grandeur of the public library, each a silent actor waiting in the wings. I could already envision Lara's face, the slow realization that would dawn on her as the actors breathed life into tales crafted to hold a mirror to her duplicity. On Monday, I met with the cast for a final rehearsal. We gathered under the oak trees in the park, their leaves a tapestry of autumn gold and crimson, nature itself setting the scene. I moved among the actors, adjusting a gesture here, a line delivery there, each nuance critical to the delicate balance of the performance. "You know," said Michael, a wiry man with a talent for dramatic pause, "I've always thought our little town could do with a dash of the dramatic. This, Ethan, is going to be one for the books." His smile was encouraging, a reflection of the excitement I had hoped to stir within them. "Yes," I replied with a quiet resolve. "It's about time our history lessons left the classroom." By Wednesday, the festival decorations adorned the main street, ribbons dancing on the breeze, and posters announcing the historic tour at every corner. I watched from my classroom window as the town transformed, the mundane replaced with the festive. This was the stage upon which my plan would unfurl, where the court of public opinion would render its silent verdict. I spent the following evenings in the solitude of the Historical Society's archives, my fingers tracing the faded handwriting of generations past. I was looking for final pieces of inspiration, for that last bit of confirmation that what I was about to do was justified. It was there, among the ink and parchment, that I found it, a letter from a scorned wife to her unfaithful husband, dating back to the 1800s. Her words were poised, her sorrow interwoven with dignity. She did not seek vengeance through violence or public spectacle, but through an appeal to his conscience and the weight of his decisions. It resonated with me, solidifying my resolve. There would be no turning back now. By Friday, everything was in place. The actors were ready. The Historical Society had whipped the town into a fervor of anticipation, and I, Ethan, the humble history teacher, was at the eye of the storm, calm and prepared. The air of that morning held a crisp promise as I walked the main street, the festival a living, breathing entity around me. All paths converged here, in the heart of Willow Creek, where the past and present would soon intertwine in a tapestry of revelation. Lara would be here, her smile practiced, her charm woven into the very fabric of the event she had orchestrated so expertly. But behind the scenes, the stage was set for my history lesson, a final tableau that would etch itself into the memory of the town and the heart of the woman who had betrayed me. The past, with all its echoes and warnings, was about to step forth into the light, and I, its conduit, would ensure that its voice was heard, its lesson not forgotten. The town clock struck 9 in the morning, the chimes echoing through Willow Creek, heralding the start of the festival. As the sun climbed higher, painting the autumn sky with the promise of a new day, I watched the townspeople gather. Their faces were alight with the innocent thrill of celebration, unaware of the undercurrents that would soon surface. I blended into the crowd, my role now observer rather than orchestrator, my emotions a whirlpool of anticipation and trepidation. Lara was there, her presence magnetic as it had always been. She greeted patrons and associates with her enchanting smile, her laughter seemingly genuine, her eyes sparkling with the joy of her creation. Despite my hurt, I couldn't help but admire her once more, the vibrant life of the community. But there was a different performance awaiting her today, and an audience poised for a drama beyond her control. At the designated hour, the historical tour commenced. I hovered at the edges as the crowd, Lara included, followed the guide from one landmark to the next. The actors, hidden in the folds of the town's historic fabric, emerged like ghosts of the past at each stop. Their stories of trust, loyalty, and betrayal unfurled, entwining with the very air we breathed. Lara's composure remained intact, her attention politely given, but as the tales deepened and the reflections of her own misdeeds became too blatant to ignore, I saw the change. A flicker of recognition, a slight falter in her gaze. Doubt crept into her flawless mask, and the armor of her confidence showed its first crack. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, a soft wave threatening to become a deluge. People glanced from the actors to Lara, and then to each other, their murmurs building the story beyond the one performed before them. The parallel narrative became an unspoken understanding, a shared realization of the truths hidden in plain sight. By the time the final act was staged, the crowd had swelled, and the air bristled with a tense expectation. In the shadow of the old courthouse, the actors delivered the climax of the tour, a tale of a revered lady of the town, undone by her own desires and indiscretions. The story was historical, but the subtext was a mirror that reflected Lara's recent past. She knew. As the actors' voices carried through the air, delivering their lines with a mix of gravity and dramatic flair, I saw the knowledge dawn upon Lara. Her eyes, wide with shock, searched the crowd until they found mine. In that moment, an invisible thread connected us, and the depth of my betrayal matched hers. Gone was the laughter, the grace with which she handled every conversation, every handshake. Now, Lara stood isolated amidst the sea of faces, her social prowess rendered useless against the tide of gossip and judgment. The performance concluded to applause, but the clapping was a hollow sound compared to the silence that fell upon Lara. People began to move away, their eyes averted, leaving her stranded in the heart of the festival she had so lovingly planned. The echo of her downfall was louder than any spoken word. I remained, rooted in place by a cocktail of satisfaction and sorrow. The revenge I had sought was complete, my message clear. History had spoken through me, and its lesson would not be quickly forgotten. Lara's eyes met mine once more, a silent plea for what? Forgiveness? Understanding? I couldn't decipher it, and as she turned away, her steps faltering as she navigated past the onlookers now watching her every move, I felt the finality of our story's end. I had preserved history, but at the cost of our future, and the price was more profound than I had anticipated. I was left standing amidst the debris of a relationship I had once cherished, a Pyrrhic victory my heart had not been prepared to win.